Speaking of unreal, is early pronunciation practice worth it? This is a very long question, so I'm going to read as much as I need for us to get the gist, because I don't want to go too far into it. But they say, hello. I wanted to ask why there was a reluctance to practice pronunciation from the start. The obvious reason might be to develop your ears because they're not trained enough, and that you could develop bad pronunciation habits. However, I've had a different experience. I'm learning French, and I've started mimicking words and sentences from day one. And I've gotten praise from native speakers about how I can make my R sounds, because, of course, R sounds are always weird in languages. Then I was taking a couple of private lessons and watching Netflix series with subtitles in French, and I noticed some words that I'd practice and became more familiar with the sentences and was able to adjust my pronunciation. And they have a list here of like reasons why they think this is a good thing to do, and they wonder what our take is on doing pronunciation practice early. I very much agree that immersion from day one is very good, especially with subtitles. But I want to know if there is benefit to practicing pronunciation at the beginning if done correctly.
Yeah, so there's differing opinions on the importance of early pronunciation practice. There are some people in the community who feel you should be doing it from day one because it helps you to refine your listening ability. There are other folks who think it should be after you've had some experience with the language and learn to hear the sounds of the language. And I think there's a misconception that we don't advocate for pronunciation practice or we say don't do pronunciation practice until later. That's actually not part of our system. We actually introduce pronunciation practice internally much earlier in the process than I think most people realize. And I don't think there's that much harm in doing it earlier. And there could even be benefit, but the challenge is whether you can accurately hear the sounds of the language that you are trying to produce. So if you get into a habit of, oh, I hear a word and I try and repeat it, but you don't do the work of trying to compare the two, of recording yourself and seeing if it actually sounds the same, then our brains are not actually very good at reproducing sound just from call and response, but we're very good at hearing the differences between two sounds. And so if you're just doing the call and response, you're likely not hearing it properly and likely not producing it correctly. But if you record yourself and then compare the two, you can hear the results and you can actually improve that over time. So there is you can definitely get a lot of value in improving your hearing and also your pronunciation early on if you do that more intensive comparison. The other reason that we don't really recommend it early on is because a lot of the tools for pronunciation practice kind of suck. The one that's most common for English learners is Elsa Speak, and we've had several natives try it out and sort of see what happens, and natives usually get rated at 80% pronunciation correctness. So there's definitely some problems there, and I've seen the same issues with other tools as well, where their pronunciation trainers aren't actually that good. So I haven't seen a specific tool out there that is really powerful for it, or really exact for it. So that's one of the reasons we don't really recommend that early on before you can hear the sounds.
Yeah, I think there's two general, or maybe even three assumptions that if they're all good, then their pronunciation could be very much worth it. Or I guess there's more too. One is if you have sort of a natural inclination to accents and being able to hear these things. Because somebody who's learning their very first foreign language, they don't really have much experience with sounds and that sort of thing. They very likely are not going to be able to do good early pronunciation practice. They just don't have the skills yet. They don't have the hearing, unless they're maybe a musician or they do have background in phonetics or that sort of thing. But there is a big skill that you develop, working with sounds, to help you hear new ones. It is a thing that you have to learn. And so if you're good at that, then it can be useful. And then the other thing is that way of practicing can be also a huge barrier, because if you have to go out of your way to create your own workflow to practice pronunciation well, it can be really difficult to do for a regular learner, especially if it's their first foreign language, that sort of thing. If you've already been learning for a while and it's like your second language, third language, yeah, you're probably going to be totally fine and do well. But you also have this huge advantage. So you're not really starting from zero, since there's this meta language learning thing that you already have. And the other thing is that I also want to clarify is that pronunciation practice is not output. When we talk about like early output, we're not really referring to mimicking or just repeating after words or practicing pronunciation. We're talking about trying to put your thoughts into new sentences to express ideas, and do that sort of mental work. Just repeating sounds and words and pronunciations can be a very helpful thing, but it's not output. And so it can be pretty easy to think of, oh, output early is not helpful, so pronunciation early is also not helpful. But those aren't really the same thing. So I guess to summarize the answer, yes, it can absolutely be worth it, but there are reasons why it might not be, which is why we recommend it a little bit later than day one, but also still relatively early in the process.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many aspects to language learning that, in my opinion, are more foundational. It's important to like get those foundations in place before you start the pronunciation practice, especially if it's your first language. Your brain is just not used to hearing sounds outside of your language. So getting it some experience with those sounds before you try to mimic them is, in my opinion, in our sort of official opinion, it's really valuable to get that before you try to do the mimic.